So in this session today we are going to see different types of timeouts in WebdriverIO. So it is very important to understand the timeouts in any of the automation tool to make a sync between your script and also the application. Not all the application has the same kind of the speedness that needs to execute your test cases. Sometimes your test cases goes very faster because line by line it wants to execute it, but your application is not that responsive or not that able to accept those requests. Sometimes let's say that your server is a bit slow or your like internet is also slow, so there could be a client side or a server side issue that could lead to a delay in terms of the actions that we are performing. For an instance, let's say that you have filled a form, you are clicking on the submit button, and now it has to process your data. So sometimes what happens, your client side is nothing but you, right, who fills those details. Now in that case, when you click on submit, your application will collect certain data that you are filling it out. Let's say that while sending that data to the server is delayed, or you have sent the details but the server is taking some time to manipulate your data or calculate your data, and then based on that it will send the response. Any one of these cases which will be delaying. So it could be depending on many reasons, like your internet is slow or the server internet is slow, or sometimes your system is not responding properly. So in that case we need to maintain a synchronization or sync between your script and also the application responsiveness. Okay, so that is where every automation tool gives some or other kind of weightings. So that is what we are going to see that. So WebdriverIO has a good set of what you call the weighting mechanism, which we will be discussing in our session. Okay, so the main basic concept of WebdriverIO timeouts, there are two different types are there. One is implicit and explicit, and this will make you very much comfortable if you are coming from, let's say that if you are coming from Selenium background, you might have heard about these two different types, the implicit and explicit. So what is implicit? So this implicit wait always will wait for each element to get identified. It means that if you are trying to locate a particular element, so how much time really you need to wait. So that is what your implicit wait will determine. In this sense, if you are specifying your implicit wait to 10 seconds, then to identify that element, your script will wait for 10 seconds. If within that 10 seconds, let's say that on the 4th second it identified the element, it will proceed to the next line of code. If it didn't go with the 10 seconds, if let's say that still after 10 seconds also it is not able to identify that element because your application is not loading properly or it is slow in loading, then it will give you an error, no such element or element not found. All kind of these errors will be showing in your console log. So now the next question is, how do we set it? Is there any place into the WebdriverIO that we can do? Yes, we do have. Now, how do you know that? Where to specify that? So for this, I found out a way. So if you go to this documentation of a browser object, right, you see that the WebdriverIO gives us a mechanism where you can print the capabilities of a browser. Okay, browser capabilities. Now what is browser? If you see, this is our browser object, right, which holds all the what do you call, the entire application or entire DOM it holds actually. So in that case we will be printing this browser and try to see that what are the different capabilities are present. Now what are these capabilities? If you go to this conf.ts file, you see this is nothing but your browser settings, right? All the settings that you have. And if you go to this section here, capabilities. So normally here is somewhere we need to specify the implicit wait. But how do you know that? Now this browser will have certain characteristics, right, to hold it. That is what we are going to first print it. And let's see that what is the default implicit wait and can we change that to something else. So for this, what I'm going to do, I'll create a new let's say that new test, and I will just copy it and put it into this and paste it, and I will just rename it to timeouts. Okay, timeouts. And here let's connect with this, or maybe I can just go to any of this. Okay, so let's print that first. So console.log, and here I will just say browser. That's it, nothing else. Browser, or maybe browser configuration. You can see there is a config. Now let's try to print this, and for this I will just change this to timeouts into this spec. Okay, and let's run this test. Okay, it's a simple one. It didn't really do anything. It just launched your browser and it stayed. But if you see here, right, this particular, if you see all the configurations it printed here, you can see. Okay, so if I go down here, you see all the specs, whatever. So it's basically printing the configuration that you have specified in this configuration file. Actually, you can see the spec, what I am executing, and all these details. And if you go down here, I think it didn't print the capabilities, it didn't print here. Now let's print these capabilities. We do have an option to print the capabilities, and you can see here. Okay, and if I rerun this one, and you can see the capability which it printed here, all these details. Okay, and if you see something, it gives all the capabilities whichever you have specified here, or you have not specified also, it will give all the details here. You can see there is a key here. If you see the timeouts, the implicit is 0. It means that by default the WebdriverIO gives a 0 millisecond. The reason is that there are a couple of points that I wanted to specify here. So one of the point is that we all come to know, right, how to specify. Like, let's say that if you want to make it as 10 seconds, you can just keep it here. Like, if you see here how to add this, let me copy paste this one. And if I go here, you can see the capabilities. This capabilities is an array. Actually, you can see here. You can use it for your Chrome browser, you can use it for Firefox and all those things. Okay, so in this case, what I can do, I can just do like this, and you can print like this. Now here, if you want to specify 10 seconds, then 10,000 millisecond you can put it. It is in millisecond. Like that you can specify here. But the WebdriverIO doesn't recommend you to use this. The reason is that this above is applicable only for single element identification. So it means that if you are doing await dollar, at that moment only it is identifiable. Okay, for multiple elements we need to always use the explicit wait or wait dot until. So if you see the documentation, I have grabbed it from the documentation. So let me go real quick here, maybe this one. If you see here, it gives all the details, implicit versus explicit, and you can see by default it is set to 0, but you can change it as you wish. And if you see here, there would be a way. Actually here they have given, you can see using implicit wait is also problematic in case you are interested to wait until an element disappears. So see, this implicit wait is always, it will wait for an element to appear it, but there would be situations where you might want to check. I can say you an example. Think about you are loading your web page. Let's say that you are clicking on the next button, which will go to your second page. Now while it is going to the second page, there will be a loading screen will be appearing. How do you know that your second page is really appearing? So you need to make sure, you need to identify that loader, and you say that until this loader is visible, you wait. Once the loader is invisible, so you are checking for the invisibility of that particular element, so that you can wait for that much amount of time. So that is where actually your implicit wait will not work here. Okay, so that is why what they are recommending to use the explicit wait. Okay, and here you can see that having an implicit wait option set unnecessarily delays on the execution. Because think about this, you are checking for invisibility of element for a for that particular loader, but your implicit wait will check that if that element is present or not. So let's say that the element is now gone, I mean it disappeared, but still your your implicit wait is still looking for that element to appear, and it will never appear there. So that is why it is not at all recommended. So, and also we have seen in our Selenium as well, do not mix up the implicit and explicit wait. So just if you are curious about to know what is explicit that I'm talking, we will see in more detailed. Explicit wait is nothing but where for each and individual elements you will be waiting. Okay, so that is all about an explicit wait. Implicit wait is kind of for all the elements it is applicable. For an instance, let's say that if I'm giving this as 10 seconds in here if I'm giving 10 seconds, it is applicable for all the elements of your framework to wait for 10 seconds if it is not present at that moment. Let's say there are your elements are taking, some elements are taking 4 seconds, then it won't wait till the 10 seconds. After 4th second it will move to the next line of code. So it doesn't, see, the implicit wait is not recommended because it's a hard wait. It is not at all a hard wait. The only reason is that to avoid the absence of an element when we are checking, that time it is not at all possible actually here. So that is why we always recommend to keep it as 0 only here. So that is one thing, but it is always good practice to understand why we are not really keeping it. Okay, fine then. So these are the reasons that I have kept it here. And also it is not applicable for multiple elements. Let's say that you have list of items are there, you want to just check whether your second element, you want to click on the second element. You cannot really do that. If your second element is taking some time, then this implicit wait is not applicable. It is always applicable when you do await dot dollar only. That is what also they have very clearly mentioned into the documentation. If you see here, now think about, you are getting a div, multiple div elements. Let's say that the second div element you want to click it. Now your implicit wait, whichever you kept here, that will not be applicable. If your second element is not appearing within 10 seconds or 5 seconds, it won't wait at all actually. Okay, so that is one more thing. Now how do you avoid that situation? How do you really make it wait till your second element appears? That's where actually there is a wait until situation is there, which we will be seeing in our future. So the basic concept, don't get confused with this code base. What it is doing, it is basically comparing this divs, this multiple element whichever it is getting, it makes sure that this element, this divs multiple elements length, until the length is not 2, it waits there. Simple concept it is doing. So explicitly you are making your script to wait for till a condition. What is that condition? That the number of element count should be able to 2. So in that case you make sure that this second element is available and you are good to go to click, to get text, whatever you want to do. So that is also one more way approach that the implicit wait is not at all recommended. Okay, now we are sure that we don't want to use it. Now the explicit wait. Now let's come back to the explicit wait. Now what is explicit wait? As I told that the explicit wait is basically used to to wait for certain commands actually. So based on certain conditions you will be waiting actually. For an instance, let's say that you want to wait for an element, a particular element. It's not like one time you have specified and it is applicable, because for individual elements you have to specify that. In our framework designing section we will see how we can make it available automatically for all the elements. But the basic concept is that the explicit wait is applicable to individual elements. Now there are couple of wait for commands that commands are nothing but methods actually that the WebdriverIO is giving, and I will quickly go over to those things. Here if you see here if you see there are again two kinds of is there. Here if you see wait for, you can see wait for clickable, wait for displayed, wait for enable, wait for exist. So these are four different methods that the WebdriverIO is giving, a kind of out of box methods they are giving. Wait for clickable, it means that you have an element, you want to wait till that element is clickable. There are certain elements where it is you can identify that element immediately, but if you click, that click property takes some time to get it enabled. That time you can use this. Let's say that next button, so you identify that next button dot wait for clickable. So in that case what will happen, it will identify this particular element and wait for this clickable property. Okay, the same thing, there is something called as wait for displayed. Okay, so it will wait till your element is displayed on the screen. Sometimes it is hidden actually. The same thing, wait for enabled. Let's say that you are doing something and your element is disabled at this moment. It takes some time to make it enabled actually, to use it. That time you can use it, wait for enabled. Wait for exist, it's like it makes very sense that wait for that existence. Let's say that that is not present at this moment on the DOM and you want to wait for that element to appear it. So you can make a wait for exist. Now the selector in the sense the element dot wait for exist. Now if you see that all these four methods have a common parameters. If I go here, you can see timeout, reverse, time message, interval. Don't get confused. We will be discussing all these things in detail in our upcoming session. But explicit wait means these are the four wait mechanisms which we can use it on an element actually. If you want to do it on a browser, not all the methods are applicable. If you see here, only wait until is present, because if you see that browser cannot be clickable, browser cannot be displayed, enabled. These are all specific to your web element only. If you are looking for the browser, you have to browser or element wait until, like I said, right? Wait until all of the elements are present, or wait until if your elements count is 2 or 3. Or let's say that there are some other wait until conditions. Just take any condition, till that condition is satisfied, you need to wait till that. Don't worry, again how I said we will be looking into that wait until also, we will see very clearly all these things. Okay, so because we are talking about timeouts, let's focus into the timeout only. Okay, and the same thing, like wait for timeout, there is a key which you can use it. Like all these things, if you see all these methods, they need a timeout, in the sense some time limit actually we need, and that you can keep it inside this wait until, as in for the individual elements. Let's say that you don't want to specify it here, you have an option here. If you go bit down, you see that wait for timeout, and it very clearly documents that default timeout for all the wait for commands, so that you don't need to specify it. If you keep it 10 seconds, any kind of wait for method that you are using in your framework, you don't need to specify that timeout there. There are some other kind of timeouts are present except your element. See, it's not always the element only that we want to wait it. Let's say that page is not loading, or let's say that you're clicking on a next button and your page takes some time to load it completely, and there is no loader for you to check it also. In that case, you just click on the next button, or you can click on the submit button. After that, you wait for that page to load. How do you know what amount of time you need to wait there? Okay, think about the browser is taking more than 10 seconds. Then you need to specify your browser. Okay, if it is more than 10 seconds also, we should be fine. And that is something which we can specify in this only. If you go to this, here into this comp.ts, and if you go to the capabilities section, there are 3 more weights we have added it. So if I go down, you see this capabilities section. If I just remove it for time being, you can see page load. By default it is giving to 30 seconds, but if you want to change this from 30 seconds to anything else, then you need to specify here. Let's say that you want to specify it as 60 seconds. See, by default it gives you 30 seconds by default. If you add it here or not, internally it takes care of that. And if you go to the documentation, it clearly tells that to you. And if I go, I think timeouts, and if you go page load timeout, you can see by default it is 30 seconds if you are not specifying anything. There is another way also. Here you can give inside your script browser.set timeout page load 10 seconds. If you don't want to give inside your script, you can give it into the comp.ts. here you come back, enable this particular timeout, you give 60, 70 seconds, whatever you want to give. If your page is taking more than 30 seconds, if your page is loading within 30 seconds, you don't need to worry about that. You can freely comment it. Backend, your page load is taking 30 seconds. The same thing, there is another option that is called as script timeout. What is this script timeout? So this is basically your asynchronous script. Like for an instance, again I will go to the documentation rather than showing you in a script. So if you see that, let me go to this, you see this code here. Okay, let's say that I'm running a kind of a, what you call, code base where asynchronously I want to execute it. Okay, you see that here I'm specifying browser.set timeout as 60 seconds. 30 seconds is the default which you would have seen here, but your, let's say that your script is taking 60 seconds, that they have put a set timeout. See, don't get confused. The main logic behind this 59 seconds is that to run this particular code, it takes 59 seconds, which is more than this 30 seconds, right? That is why explicitly it is specifying before to this only. Okay, so what it does, it will go for 60-second wait. I mean, it will set itself and then it waits for this much amount of time. If not this 60 seconds, you can specify here as well, which will be applicable for your entire framework. And but if you are specifying in this, like this way, this is only applicable for your current browser, means current test only, that one. When you go back to a new test, the browser session is gone and it again reset back to whatever you have specified. So don't get confused. I think not all pages that takes more than 30 seconds, because if it goes more than 15 seconds, you don't need to write the automation test cases there. You have to talk to your developer or architect to improvise that. But if your script is taking 30 seconds, yes, that could be a possibility. Think about, you are doing some calculations in your application. Your application is doing some financial calculations, which is integrating to a lot of different other third-party vendors. That time your asynchronous script might take more time. Okay, so this is actually asynchronous script level. But if you see all of our test cases, right, we are using async await, means we are running this asynchronous script into a synchronous way. In that case, what we need to do, and we are using, like, let's say that some kind of test framework, right, unit testing framework. If you go to this package.json, you see that we are using somewhere Jasmine framework. Okay, some of you might be using Mocha framework, some of you using might be Cucumber framework. So these are the frameworks. These frameworks will give you a template, actually, this describe it block. If you are using Cucumber, then you will be using give and when, then feature file, all those concepts. So in that case, for each test case, for each it block to execute, you can even specify certain timeouts. I'll give you one example there. So if you see here, If you see, because I'm using Jasmine framework, I have this Jasmine options. If you are using Mocha framework, you will have Mocha options. If you are using Cucumber, you will see the Cucumber options. Let me show you that. If you come back here, WebdriverIO related commands, wait for all these things we discussed. If you come back to the framework related, you can see that here this is framework related Mocha option. Because I'm using Jasmine framework, it is a Jasmine OPTS. If your framework is using Cucumber, you will get Cucumber OPTS. And here you can see all the default timeouts are 20 seconds. Here it is giving 10 seconds somewhere I saw. You can see by default the timeout is 10 seconds, but it is actually here they are giving 20 seconds. The means what they are saying is that if you see here, they are giving a default of 60 seconds. When you install your WebdriverIO, they give 60 seconds. Doesn't matter whatever default timeout they are giving, you are always free to change it to whatever time you want. Okay, so because I'm using Jasmine framework here, I can set my timeout. What is this 60 seconds? So the main logic behind this is I can wait for this particular test to execute within 60 seconds. If it crosses more than 60 seconds, it should give me an error. It should fail my test case. I'll show you that. So think about, so by intentionally what I'm doing here, I'm making it wait for 5 seconds. And here I'm saying that each test should take only 5 seconds. Here 5000 millisecond means 5 seconds. And I have only one test case. The same thing, let's say that I have two test cases. Here this test case is taking, let's say, 4 seconds, or maybe another one I will create it. Here I'm just manually making it sure that to complete this test case, it should take more than 5 seconds, because waiting itself it is taking 5 seconds, and to load that browser and all those internal things it might take 500 milliseconds. The same thing, this is 4 seconds, this is 7 seconds. But what am I telling? That each test case should complete within 5 seconds only. Let's see what it gives me here. So I will run this one, npm run WDIO. Yeah, this 4 second got passed. You can see that one passing and two got failed. Why did it failed? You can see a clear cut reason here it is giving. The test case should finish within 5 seconds, because the timeout I have given 5 seconds, and my first one is taking more than 5 seconds. Third one is taking more than 7 seconds. That is why only this is the one where it executed properly. So that is how actually you can get to know. Okay, you can see the browser configuration also printed. So see, there are different things. You cannot really determine actually how much time it takes. But normally what we do, there are conditions. Think about you are doing debug to your test case. At that time what happens? Though this test case will finish within 4 seconds, while you are debugging it, it might take 5 to 6 seconds more, because you hold your code there, you do certain analysis, then you continue the execution, right? So it takes some kind of amount of time. So we have some conditional also we can do it. We will see that in our upcoming sessions, where we can say that if I am debugging my test case, take it, let's say that 25 seconds it should take, it should wait. If it is release in the sense I'm just running my test cases, like how I did. I've just did this npm run WDIO, right? There is no debug involved. Line by line it executes. That time you make that default timeout interval is, let's say that 15 seconds. Like these conditions also we can enter it here. So this is basically, now you might say that why do we need to worry about if a test case takes 20 seconds or 20 minutes also? The problem is that for the performance standpoint, you cannot make your test case to go for longer run. For an instance I just spoke, right? Let's say your page load is taking more than 2 minutes. Now, and let's say that your test case is navigating 5 different pages. At that time, 2 minutes it will wait for 5 different page load navigations. So 10 minutes is just took to wait for that particular to wait and to execute that test case, which is not correct actually. This much of time if you wait it, if you are running 200 test cases, let's say, so it might take more than 10 hours of time, where you cannot give your test results to make sure to analyze whether we can release it or not. So at that moment, if your test case is failing because of this, what do you call it, it didn't complete within that time, if you mean to you need to understand that that particular module or the test case is not appropriate. Let's say that you are making some unnecessary waits inside your test case. See, not all the test cases are wrong because of your application is not behaving as expected. Even you would have written something, some for loop is going infinitely, let's say that. So you need to somewhere limit your test case execution time. So that's where actually these are very important to understand the timeouts, to synchronize with your application behavior, and also to make sure that your test case should give a proper and a reliable result. You need to do all these things. Okay, so I think those are pretty much the weights that I have to discuss. So hope this session is useful. Do subscribe to this YouTube channel and stay tuned because we will be seeing some more interesting topics. Thank you for watching.